Thank you, Sandra. You said you want me to prattle on for 15 minutes or so?
Well,
Oh,
as long as you see fit, 5, 10, whatever.
okay.
Yeah, just I
Oh,
think just a
okay.
good
Okay.
overview of you and the
Okay.
company and your sort of
Sure.
backstory and working with imported brands, I think would be really
Sure.
interesting.
Okay. Great. Well, nice to meet you, everyone. Uh, Paul Kraft. I live in Tokyo, and I'm American. I wasn't say American originally, but I guess I am American. But I've been in Japan in the food business for 30 years, I suppose, and been in Japan now for this year will be the 17th year. Um, let's see. I originally came in 2008 with Starbucks, um, and ran their consumer packaged goods division. So this is not the 700 coffee shops that were there. Now they're about 1,200 coffee shops, but I was in charge of launching into the convenience stores, supermarkets, and department stores. So that was a very exciting. And then have had a couple other adventures here, launching a food service a chain from the U.S. that didn't go as hoped, but now looking back on it was probably a great experience, even though it didn't feel like it at the time. Then managed the professional business, so the food service business for Nestle Nespresso here, before most recently 5 6 years at Haribo, managing the Haribo gummy business here. Mostly what I've done is some sort of the first person on the ground, so to speak, for foreign businesses. So both I guess for the food service business, Starbucks and Haribo, I was the first person here. So I tend to work most of my clients. So I became a consultant about a year and a half ago. My firm is called Japan IQ, and I've actually done more work for brands that are here and have been here for a long time, and probably are not very pleased or happy with their progress. And that probably is the fact that there are a lot of, let's just call them, market entry people out there. And I kind of always say, well, entering the market's no problem. Being successful is a whole nother thing. So it's usually after a while that people have questions about the fitness of their distributors, or why things take so long in Japan, etc. So that's where I come in. Today I have about five, six, 7 clients, mostly food, some non-food. And the reason why the non-food can work is that some of the issues are the same. So a lot of what works is just having someone here when you have a potential Japanese um, importer or partner or retailer, and you're from the UK, or you're from Europe, or you're from America. They're like, okay, great. Well, but we have our guy on the ground is Paul. And oh, well, Paul, okay, well, Paul speaks Japanese. Paul does this. Paul's been here for 17 years. Paul knows many of the buyers. So that immediately, before even meeting me, tends to perk up some ears, because the Japanese are quite risk averse, and the last thing they want to do is get into some sort of disagreement with someone from another country in a language that they probably don't speak very well on average. So many of my clients, let's see, Jack Link's beef jerky. So beef jerky, very American thing, but it's the number one uh, brand and company doing that in the world. I also do a lot of work with Costco Japan. So Costco Japan has become quite a force. They have 34 warehouses now. They call them warehouses, and easily now the best place to, if that's something that, if it's appropriate for your brand and it's fit for you for fits your strategy, that's a great place to launch. In Japan, it used to be that it was these small import grocery stores with very premium items from around the world, but that never really led to any volume, and never really led to a lot of consumer acceptance. But now with Costco, you have immediate volume. So the first order might be 2 or depending, but might be 2 to 4 container loads. And then because now it's such a big presence for Japanese consumers, it's a trial and awareness driver itself. So my client Jack Links, the beef jerky client, very, very low brand awareness, but now having been in Costco for 8 months, we're starting to see, oh, I've seen that at Costco. Oh, I tried that at Costco. So it ends up being a win-win and a unique entry point into Japan. My model is, it's just me. I'm a sole proprietor, but I, have a team of freelancers from anywhere from convenience stores to food scientists to people who work at Google or YouTube, and I bring them in as needed, depending on that. So that's a lot of fun because I can sort of pick and choose who's best for a given project or for a given task. And yeah, that's what I enjoy doing. I think, yeah, Sandra, you mentioned FoodX, so looking forward. That's 11 days away. So looking forward to, spending time with everyone there. And I think it's in my profile, but I do have a very strange hobby, is that I make YouTube videos about Japanese retailers from the Western CPG point of view. So if you want to know what happens at Costco Japan or Don Quixote or 7-Eleven or any of these, I can get everyone a link. So yeah, I guess last thing as far as trends go, unfortunately, since the COVID pandemic, the yen has depreciated very, very rapidly and very, very badly. So unfortunately, foreign products are quite expensive here in Japan. Not saying that there's not opportunity, especially with some recent free trade agreements, but that's probably the big one. Categories that are growing very nicely is frozen food. Let's see what else is growing. Frozen food, cheese is growing. Craft beer is still growing. And yeah, that's I guess the number one trend affecting the Japanese market would be the shrinking of household sizes. So you have household, there's 123 million people, and that ends up being about 500,000 households. That might be wrong, but I do know that over 62% of those households are 1 or 2 person households. So these households shop differently. They shop more often. They buy smaller quantities. They unique packaging and things like that. So that's probably the big mega trend that's been pushing the Japanese market along for a few years now. So woo, I don't know how many minutes that was, Sandra, but yeah, happy to answer any questions, but it's great to be here.
Excellent. Yeah, thanks, Paul. No, that's really, really helpful, and some good insights there. And quite interesting what you say on Costco, because they often come up as sort of best customer in so many places. They're good to work with. And I know a number of our brands do work with them in different markets, maybe starting in the UK, and have managed to use those connections to get into international markets. So that's definitely one to watch. I've watched one of your videos already. I watched the Caldi one, which I thought was
okay,
very interesting. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, and that's a store, I think, I don't know if it's on everybody's radar, but I think certainly from our perspective, I appreciate what you say about the small volumes, but it does seem to be very open and very receptive to international brands, and you do see quite a few British products in there.
Yeah, Caldi has about 500 stores. So yeah, you're right. That is another good one. They tend to be very price competitive, but no, that's another good one for sure.
Yeah. I think your video, you said they started trying to sort of replicate a bookshop or something. Was there?
Yes, they did. You go in there. It's easy to get lost, and I'm just looking for the chickpeas. Where are the chickpeas? But
come out with some Grandma Wild biscuits.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, does anyone want to ask a question or share their own thoughts on Japan. I know some of you have been out to FoodX previously as exhibitors. I know Sarah, David, you've been there in the past. Ian, I guess your business is very dependent on the Japanese market. So yeah, feel free to turn your mics off and jump in.
Yeah, I'll jump in, and thanks very much indeed, Paul. That's interesting. I've been a
Oh,
few.
my
My wife's
pleasure.
Japanese, and I've been a few times.
Oh, okay.
But we have sort of limited presence in Japan, and I think one of the things that's always sort of struck me, apart from the time frames that one has to get used to, but I've been married to one for 25 years, so I kind of I'm accustomed to that, as maybe you have as well. Um, but I see a lot of 7-Elevens, I see Watsons, I see places like Caldi, and I see a lot of our products are sort of in the premium category, confectionery category, and we do okay in places like Hankyu and Takashimaya and places like that. But what
Okay.
in all of the visits I've been, I've not really seen the equivalent of a Sainsbury's or a Tesco's or an Asda or sort of large footprint supermarkets. Maybe that's a reflection of
Hmm.
what you were saying about more frequent, smaller households, more frequent retail visits. But am I just not looking in the right places? Am I missing something here? What's the deal
I
there?
think you might be maybe both missing something and looking in the wrong places. And I
Right,
don't mean to
right.
be cheeky
No,
with
no, no,
that,
not at all, not at all.
but yeah, the larger, I think we around the world are often called hypermarkets.
Yeah,
They do have here. We don't call them hypermarkets because they're not as hyper. They're a little smaller, but here they're called GMS, and there are GMS. Eon is the
yeah.
top GMS in Japan, and they have about the GMS size. They have very many formats, many banners, but their GMS they have about 1,000 total
Mhm.
throughout Japan. So that's a big one. They are a great retailer, a progressive retailer. Um, and they do some of their own importing. So and they're when I say progressive, they do a little more cross merchandising and things of this nature. They
Mhm.
also have their own liquor chain called Ihan Liquor, and they also have their own version of Caldi, which is called Cafe Rante.
Mhm.
I think they're also a large mall operator. So, and I think they would operate the GMS stores in the mall, and right outside of GMS stores would be the Caldi. And so I think they thought, well, why do we have to give all that sales to Caldi? So they're trying to compete with them a little bit. Um, I have a video on them if you'd like, but
No,
yeah,
no,
yeah,
I'm going to start browsing some of that. Yeah.
that's one to keep on your radar.
And GMS stands for what?
General merchandising store, general
General
merchandise
merchandising store.
stores. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Brilliant.
Yeah, and I know we took people out to Meidi-ya and Seijuishi as when we did the store
Mm-hmm.
visits. I think they both seemed to
Yep.
be quite receptive to high-end premium
Mm-hmm.
products as well.
Yep. Yep.
Definitely ones to have a look at. Yeah, and those of you that are on the call that are going out to FoodX, where the exhibition centre is, there is a big shopping centre called, is it Tokyo Garden City or something like that?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And there's quite a few stores in there that are definitely worth a look, including one that sort of focuses on the natural channel. So I think that's definitely worth a look while you're there. Obviously, we're doing a store visit program before the show starts, just to get people out and
Okay.
about to see what's going on.
Okay.
But yeah, anyone that's going to be at the exhibition centre, and somewhere to have dinner as well if you're needing some slightly more
Yeah. Yeah.
Western
Well,
food.
I will be there every day, so I'll drop by and say hello to everyone.
Great, good stuff.
I think the other thing that stunned me about Japan is the scale of the food halls in some of the stations. Certainly, is it Sonomaya Station in Osaka, and the food hall there. I mean, it puts Selfridges and Harrods and the likes to shame. And the footfall going through those, which people claim is lower than it was, but when I was last through one of those, it was just heaving. Sort of from
Mm-hmm.
4 o'clock in the afternoon, just
Mm-hmm.
tens of thousands of people. And these stations have got 6-10 million people passing through them on a daily basis, and they're often built, if I'm right, Paul, they're often built on below Thailand, beneath huge shopping malls are sort of built on these stations, and you know
Right.
they're always very, very interesting to have a look at.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure, for sure. And that's where a lot of premium foods are purchased as people pass through. They maybe get a little treat or what
Mm.
have you, um, for dinner or after work or something like that. Yeah, certainly.
It's an incredible market, incredible market.
Yeah,
Nick, did
well,
you
happy to join and help
Thank you.
everybody out.
I think
Nick,
my
did I
wife's
see
going to
you
be
want to
there
join in?
tomorrow night. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, so nice to know.
Sorry, can I just ask one question? Sorry, I'm Nick from Tyrrell's Crisps. We've been operating in Japan now for a while, and it's a market which we've never really sort of spent a lot of time on. It's one of the things which I'm looking to focus on this year, and indeed I am visiting Japan week after next. It just coincides with FoodX, so I'm meeting with a distributor there. Is there anything you could share in terms of how structurally it works? So if I'm working with a distributor, how then do they
Mhm.
get into the major retailers? Is there another? Is there a structure? Is there a process?
Yes. Just Nick, Nick, right? I'm sorry. Did
Yeah,
you say
yeah, yeah,
what's the
yeah.
name of your chips?
Tyrrell's Crisps.
Is your distributor Tomoe?
It is indeed.
Okay, that's a kilometer that way, and I know Yamada-san, the president, very well.
Right. Excellent.
He's a nice guy. Let's when you get here, let's meet.
Yeah. Okay.
Um,
Perfect.
it's a the headline here for this group. It's a jungle. It's an absolute jungle. The the UK market has, you know, Sainsbury's and Asda and Tesco and Waitrose, whatever. Those five chains will make up, I don't know, 70 to 75% of all groceries.
Mm.
Well, the top 23 chains in Japan make up only 25%. So it's an extremely fragmented market. This is the challenge in the supermarkets. And people like Tomoe, they would reach the import supermarkets a little better. So Caldi, Seijoishi, some of the ones that Sandra was talking about before. Now Tomoe, nice guy, consider him a friend, but his sort of perimeter of what he can reach is limited. He can get into Costco. He can get into. I have seen him get into some convenience stores, but and maybe Eon, like I mentioned before, but because it's so fragmented, he needs to work with other downstream wholesalers and distributors in order to get that reach sort of outside the channels we've been talking about. So yeah, I think you probably have a good guy there, but it just takes forever. And what's the expectation? And yeah.
I mean, I'll take up your offer for a coffee, for a meet, if that's possible.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah.
So I look forward to seeing you then. Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Yeah, for sure. Yep.
Great. Thanks, Nick. Lee, did you switch your mic off? Were you looking to jump in? Oh, Sarah. Yeah, sorry. Go ahead, Sarah.
Yeah, no. Yeah, lovely to meet you, Paul. Thank you. A lot of what you were saying really resonates.
Great.
Yeah,
the slow and the pain and the jungle and
yeah, no, all of that. Tick, tick, tick for Japan. Yes. But no, like some of the others, I mean, we've been in Japan for a long time now, with a distributor that, maybe over 15 years, and with their only brand, which, it's a lot of people keep saying, you should be big, you must be big in Japan. We have specialty teas. And but we're not. It's not a big region for us. But I think from your explanation in terms of the fragmented market, the fact as a distributor, it's then about sub-distributors and having those contacts so that they can get into kind of the retail channels and things. That's really interesting. It certainly rings true for me. But I wanted to ask you about British fairs, because our distributor tends to go to British fairs an awful lot. And I think I understand them, but I'm not sure whether I do or not. So I'm just wondering if you could explain what these British fairs are.
Would this be British fairs in retailers? I'm not
Yeah,
familiar
so I
off the
think
top
it
of my
tends to
head.
be a lot of the big
Okay.
department stores, so Takashi Mayer, etc.
Ah, okay, okay. Like in the department store basements, I assume. So this gets back to what what David was talking about before. These are opportunities, but they're very sort of transient. I mean, it's you go in and you sell for a week, and maybe that's a nice piece of business, and then you're gone. And then
Yeah.
the next week it's the New York Fair, and the next week after that. I mean, it's just the theme, right? So
Sure.
it's a way to maybe get some sales, but it's not necessary, and maybe some awareness, but it's not. It's probably, I suspect, having met you 2 minutes ago, it's probably not what you're hoping for.
Yeah, no, it's been a constant theme throughout my time looking after Japan, and I've always queried how the significance of them. It's kind of like, I get it, but actually, okay, what's it going to lead on to? And it's not a lot is the answer. So interesting.
I'm getting roped into a New Zealand fair for one of my clients, and it's just like, well, yeah, you could be in the store for a week. I'm like, okay, well, I don't want to be. There's maybe a funny joke, but I don't want to be. I want to be competing in the main arena, not in the traveling circus. Is that what, I don't know? Is that what I want to say?
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's I hear you, but I would be curious to hear more about your distributor and what other things they do and what else they're selling and where they're selling and where you think they're not selling your product.
Yeah, no, I think that's we're their only brand. So
at all, or in tea?
Yeah. Just at all.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. Sounds like you guys need a conversation.
Yeah.
But no, it's a market that I'm focusing on. So no, I'll kind of reach out to you, Paul, directly.
Okay.
Thank you.
Excellent. Yeah, thanks, Karen. I think your hand was up. Do you want to come in?
So very quick hello to Paul directly, just to let you know. So I did mention we had our final FoodX briefing yesterday. So I'm going to connect you with the exhibitors. I've put the catalogue in the chat there. But yeah, primarily the categories of companies that are exhibiting at the show cover alcoholic drinks, bakery, meat and tea. There's quite a few tea companies. So yeah, it might be worth you having a look at the catalogue. Yeah, look forward to meeting you there. And I did also ask the embassy to invite you to our reception. But yeah, it'd be good to introduce you to companies out there.
Thank you.
Very good. Maybe your first taste of English sparkling wine. Who knows? Yes. Very good. Good. Well, I think that's really useful, Paul. Thank you so much for giving up your time.
Thank you
late
very
on
much.
a Friday
My pleasure.
for you.
No, my pleasure.
Maybe pop your email in the chat. If you could. I mean, and just a reminder to members that you can connect with Paul through the member portal. If you go to the contacts and companies bit, all the members are listed there that you can connect with. And yeah, I think it's definitely a very exciting market. It's in the UK's top 20. I think it's worth 350 million pounds of exports. And yeah, there's definitely some categories in which we excel that I'm sure there's more opportunity. And I think your insights on Costco are particularly telling. I think often you're right, exporters do start with that premium store focus, but actually the opportunities are bigger elsewhere. We need to shift focus a little bit. Great, thank you. We're very welcome to stay on and listen.
Yes, I'd like to hear what everyone else
has
going on. Thank you.
And we do these every third week. We sort of invite somebody on and have a conversation. And yeah, I know those that join very much value it. So yeah, we're gonna shift to the organic world now. Lee, I think you're there. Yeah, it'd be interesting just to get some thoughts from you, given that you've got the most recent insights from the organic report and what's happening internationally that everyone needs to be aware of. So yeah, over to you.
Thanks very much, Sandra, and thanks for inviting me to join you today. I have got some slides, so I'm going to try and share screen and hope that works. After so many years of doing everything online, you'd think this would be straightforward. So let's try that. There we go. So I'm rather hoping you can see. No, that's not working. Okay, let me try. Here we go. Now hopefully do that.
Yeah, it looks
Yeah.
like it's going to appear in a moment. Yep.
Okay.
Yep, you're in. Yep, perfect.
Okay, thanks very much. So just very quickly, introducing myself, I work with Sort Association certification. My role is very much a sort of trade and regulatory role. In terms of who we are the UK's leading organic certification business. DEFRA stats suggest that we've got 90% of the certification business in the UK plus. I'm not sure that's quite right, but I'd say we've at least got 70%. So we're double checking those figures right now. But we are an unusual as far as certifiers go in organic, in that we're not for profit. We operate as we are a subsidiary of a charity, and that charity has existed since 1946. And currently its focus is really on continuing to build a sort of policymaker and consumer and citizen and farmer and food business awareness of both farming and land use issues and healthy, sustainable diets. And this sort of, we're a meeting ground, really, I think, for an awful lot of stakeholders who act in those spaces. So in terms of certification, we have around about 1,500 food licensees in the UK. I know we've got at least one or two of you on this call. And one of the things that we do is take responsibility for the UK Organic Market Report. I'm going to only say a couple of things about the UK because, of course, what we're more interested in is what's going on around the rest of the world, I would assume. But I would caveat that with saying that we have seen a lack of interest in export from our stakeholders since Brexit, given that about half of the exports were into Europe and they did encounter some significant red tape as a result of Brexit. So we're seeing a sort of recovery interest, so we're going to be dedicating more time moving forward to thinking about supporting our businesses with some more insights around opportunities elsewhere. And hopefully that means a bit more reversion back to some more conversations with you guys at FDEA, because we've probably been a bit distant for a few years. So with that sort of out of the way, I'm just going to move on and just say, as I say, very quickly about the UK market. In a nutshell, we are seeing really good value and volume growth now in the UK. We had a fairly sluggish period, particularly throughout sort of 2021 to 2022, where the value we were seeing was largely inflationary, as volumes and units were actually into negative during that time. So we launched, as Sandra alluded to, our market report only yesterday. I'm really pleased to report over 7% value growth, and sitting beneath that is also some good healthy volume growth at just under 4% when we look at NIQ data for our supermarket channels. So we are very much into recovery. The global market at the moment is worth in the region of well, actually, I'm going to move on to the next slide because I think that's actually coming up in a moment, but our own market just over 3.7 billion, and the global market is slightly more mixed picture. Before I go on to that, just one of the big challenges for us is really where our trade balance is in the UK on organic. Whilst we've seen this increasing spend on organic on the red line there, we've seen a sort of bit of a stagnation in organic land area. So whilst we are fairly self-sufficient for in-season on produce, with the exception of probably top fruit, soft fruit, we do import an estimated 40% of our meat, fish and poultry, and when we go into arable products, that's a lot higher. So I think one of the key things we want to do is actually, first of all, address that reliance on imports by persuading our government to invest a bit harder in domestic production. And on the back of that, then the next step logically is to think about how we can be joining those in Europe who've got solid policy position in government around an export strategy around their organic markets. For example, Ireland with Bord Beer's focus on organic and sustainable, and other EU nations. Standout would be Denmark and the Netherlands, who've got very solid government-backed export programs on organic. So in terms of the global market, I'm afraid that information is rather slow to come through for organics around the world. So we do tend to see sort of 2-year lag on data. We ourselves are reaching out to trade associations to try and get something more current, but I'm afraid what I've got is a little bit old. I would advise that there is an organisation called FIBL, and they publish this rather, I'm going to stick it into my, it's disappearing because of my background, but no, I can't get it to appear. But I'll post something to Sandra to share with you. But it's called The World of Organic Agriculture. It's a free access publication by FIBL. And that gives you lots of stats for, again, there's a 2-year lag on that, but it will give you growth rates for a huge number of markets globally on organic. In Europe for 2023, you can see it's a very mixed picture with markets such as France, which have been typically a powerhouse for organic, being quite flat. Sweden, one of the traditional lead nations in terms of organic growth, and Denmark equally, who've got very high per capita spends on organic. Denmark are one of the leaders with 12% of all their food is organic compared with 1.6% in the UK. They've had some difficult times, largely due to the cost of living crisis kicking in, and arguably their organic market's been a bit overextended in certain areas. France in particular saw a lot of spend and stimulation around supply chains from European money. But sadly, Agence Bio, their main trade association, admit not really backed up by an equivalent effort on consumer awareness. And the result, unfortunately, is that consumers were heading into large format stores, seeing organic and on offer, but not quite sure why they were spending additional money or premium. So there's been a significant kind of withdrawal in large format stores. Germany has suffered a bit from that with a move to discounters. I think moving over to discounters in those larger markets, Italy, Germany, France, has been a strong theme, unsurprisingly, throughout the cost of living crisis. What we have seen, the data we are seeing for 2024, so just before I go on to that, 2% growth in the UK in 2023, pretty respectable compared with what's been going on in some of those larger markets. For 2024, we have started to see data coming through from Germany, so really solid recovery there, with AMI reporting growth rates looking likely to be closer to 6% value again. And again, France starting to nudge back into positive, but pretty modest there, expecting to see just under 0.5%. Again, so, showing off a bit in the UK, our growth rate looking pretty respectable there compared, but we are waiting to see what starts to come through. Our market report for 2024 data is fairly, as I said, just landed, and other organisations around Europe are yet to kind of gather that data for 2024. So we're really interested to see what happens moving forward. Just a little bit on the regulatory side. Before I do, I would say that the only markets that we're seeing some predictions on. US market for 2024 is a big one. It's the biggest organic market globally. They are edging again back towards a really good growth rates. They're anticipating to see high single digit for 2024, and the general slow return to sort of the double-digit growth that they saw over a decade ago. But again, similar picture to the UK, really. So a sudden kind of recovery and looking quite promising. So in terms of regulatory stuff, just quickly wanted to whistle through some of this, and I won't go into huge detail on some of this, and I will I'll share the slides with FDEA, and hopefully you'll be able to pick those up. But UK currently, in terms of export to the EU, when we Brexited, we retained an old, now outdated European regulation on organic in our own legal framework. Right now, GB ports are continuing to permit organic food coming in from EU countries and EEA countries without any certificate of inspection, but we are required by Europe to produce one of these on the traces system for every consignment going out. So in both directions, importers and exporters and first consignees all have to be certified and inspected in order to move goods. And the products must meet the scope of the trade cooperation agreement. And the real challenge we've struggled with Europe in the last few years is that the oddity of the way that the TCA was hurriedly created is that there is a sort of rule of origin rule around organic acceptance and equivalence. So what that means in essence is if you want to bring in a lemon into Europe from Morocco, you can't then re-export that lemon as organic into GB unless you process it, further prepare or process it in some way. If it's grown in the EU or further processed in the EU, then it doesn't matter what its origin was, it can move and be accepted by GB as organic, and the same vice versa. Which is, huge headache. It means that a lot of people just simply trading goods through Europe or through GB into each other's territories. We don't want to who do nothing other than break down consignments or repackage, they then lose the equivalency. In terms of movement into UK or GB rather, it's not being very strongly policed at the moment, but we are seeing consignments actually being rejected where they've been subject to further scrutiny, and it's transpired that their origin is not really EU. What we are seeing for goods moving into GB is that by February 2027, we are hoping to have a system in the UK for import. It's hoped it'll be an electronic system, DEFRA prioritising this as part of their tactical focus. When they do, then the problem will become more immediate around scopes in the same way that it is for export to the EU, i.e. if the product doesn't meet that scope, i.e. it's not prepared or grown in your own zone, then you're not going to be able to get a certificate of inspection endorsed. So the problem will become much more acute for goods moving into GB. But right now it is a problem for goods coming out of GB into the EU, and has understandably reduced quite a lot of trade from our perspective into EU. How do we actually deal with that? Well, there's no appetite for reopening the trade and cooperation agreement at the moment and looking at all 1,200 pages of it again, unsurprisingly. So we are making some practical suggestions to our own government in terms of how we might handle. I won't bore you with those, but there are some tweaks to the regulation, removing some core documents out of the regulation into annexes that would enable us to tweak them in such a way that might be helpful. If you want any further information about that, do come back to us. In terms of other EU trade challenges, they've got their own problems in the EU which are affecting the organic sector. There has been a move for all of the third country certifiers out there. So where the EU doesn't have an equivalency agreement or a trade agreement as it has with us, and I think there are trade equivalency agreements with approximately 13 other big nations, where that's not in place, the EU rely on individual certifiers out in those third countries to be on an approved annex list for particular product commodities in organic. There's been a move with a deadline originally was this year to move all of those certifiers from equivalency to compliance. What that means is they can't just be deemed to be or judged to be equivalent based on what they're doing and the standards they're operating to. They are expected to operate to the EU standard. This has been a major bone of contention. It's been there's clearly a lot of expense and hassle for certifiers out there around the world, and as a result, the Commission have been persuaded to extend the deadline for that until 2025. So right now, certifiers are able to issue certificates of inspection, provided that they started their application, and about 50 bodies have submitted technical dossiers to the EU. So it's in motion, but there is still some opportunity for trade disruption there if those certifiers around the world drag their feet on this requirement. I won't go into this one in great detail, but there's also a bigger challenge around EU regulations around what we call PGCA or participatory, what we tend to refer to as group scheme certification out there in the rest of the world. So lots of rules have changed. This is quite a challenge for countries, particularly India, who export to the EU. So again, if with extra rules like groups having to be limited in terms of their size and various other requirements that they're subject to, again, I won't go into detail, but again, it could restrict the supply into EU if this does not resolve the satisfaction of the bodies globally. But group schemes are a big thing globally, and again, if the EU make it too difficult for them to be certified, that could slow down supply. We don't have this problem in the UK because we have a trade agreement. So one of the advantages of that trade agreement is we don't have to meet these same requirements when we import goods. So there could be an opportunity or an advantage for UK exporters into EU if the EU themselves make it harder for businesses to directly import into the EU. So it's one to keep an eye on from a perspective of kind of regulatory pressure on the rest of the world by the EU. Similarly with EUDR, the new deforestation regulations, and I would have said the same with CSRD and CFDDD, but these new directives look like they're being stalled. But the organic regulations, I think, are still going to be pertinent. Export to the US, very quickly, there have been some big changes there for would-be exports from the UK. The strengthening of organic enforcement rules have been put through. These are really to bring the US up to the EU level in terms of robustness around import rules. And the big changes have been that there's a global integrity database, which looks a lot like Traces in terms of what it tries to achieve. So it's a digital platform for bodies issuing national organic program certificates. So again, like the EU, there's a certificate needed for each consignment. This system also requires importers in the US to be licensed. So we've had some challenges where UK businesses, they have also acted as the importer in the US, and they've not been certified with a body approved by the US USDA. There is a way around this. You can get NOP certification through bodies like EcoCert in France and others remotely for your importer in the US. But yeah, it's been causing a few problems. So fundamentally, the SOE it implicates a lot broader range of handlers in the US. So basically anyone who financially benefits, so brokers, importers, distributors who previously were not implicated in the organic regulation in the US now are. Export to the rest of the world, very few changes. It's all quite stable there. Japan continues to be an equivalency with the UK, but there's some issues around the Jazz logo, which must be used. And there are two ways to apply it, either by the registered importer in Japan who you work with, or in fact, it can be applied to product in the UK under a consigning contract between the importer and the company applying the logo in the UK. In Saudi Arabia, we've seen some recent changes now. All exports must be accompanied by an export certificate. Qatar is an interesting one. We were the Qatari delegation earlier in the week in the UK who are interested in our organic systems, organic food. The Middle East continues to be a really strong prospect for organic. There's a lot of growing interest in health and sustainability amongst those shoppers, which are the key drivers for organic purchasing. But we're now being told the certificate of conformity that they were going to require may now have been dropped thanks to some negotiations between UK government and the Qatari government. So we're just waiting for news on that, but that should make life a bit easier. South Korea is another tricky one and is in a bit of flux at the moment. So currently food products must be certified in accordance with UK regs, which you'd expect. And the scope of processing must follow the Korean domestic standard. So we need to complete an NAQS document, which will be transferred via an e-system, and your certification body needs to do that. But we do have a website around exporting to Europe and the rest of the world on our Salt Association website. If you Google Salt Association export, you should find that site quite easily, and that's a useful repository of the very latest information specifically for those third countries that do have some specific rules around organic. And as I mentioned earlier, we do hope to start building some more intelligence on what those markets are doing and where the differences are. But I would say consumers all around the world are remarkably similar in terms of their motivations for buying organic. There is either it's very much driven by health and purity and integrity. Certainly Asian markets continue to be really focused on the sort of integrity and purity of products, and that's a big motivator, and less so on the sustainability credentials. Whereas European, US markets still environment, personal health, animal welfare still continue to be really big motivators for buying into organic. Finally, just a few implications around future international trade for us in the organic world, things we're thinking about. Divergence with the EU on equivalency. We've got that equivalency wrapped up in the Trade and Cooperation Agreement right now, but we are drifting. They have new regulations, the EN 848 regulation. There are already some differences, again, around group scheme requirements I mentioned earlier, which is more pertinent for developing South imports into the EU. But there are differences on things like permitted additives and flavors in those two different regulations now. So we may have some fun when we come to renegotiate the equivalency moving forward, particularly given that we seem to be stalling in the development of our own domestic organic regulations. So we're watching with interest, but there is a lot of cost saving going on, as you would probably appreciate in the UK government. And we're concerned that development of the UK regulation might be one of the areas that may see some restriction on resource. So that's we are trying to make it clear to the government that that's a potential threat to ongoing international trade if we don't keep up, as are our current regulations on precision bred organisms or genetic technologies. We're seeing some inadequacies in that regulation that might not be particularly reassuring for some overseas markets. So we're working quite closely with the government to come up with some ways to ensure that we aren't allowing these products to drift into organic supply chains, which we have a regulatory obligation to exclude them. So it's quite a hot topic at the moment. And finally, just on data, we are also pressing the government for organic specific commodity codes, because we really have not got great visibility of what's coming in and out of the UK. There are other sources of data we can use to triangulate it, but again, in terms of getting further support for organic exports from our government and also making the necessary policy arguments around trade imbalance, it's really important to have robust data, and all the better if it actually comes from our own government. So that's all from me. There's a couple of contact details for myself on that final slide. And also would say that if you want to keep up with the latest, we do have a certification news mailer that you can sign up for. Free. It doesn't require any registration other than just to sign up, and that will keep you up to date with all the latest news and pertinent changes for the organic sector. So thanks very much. I'm going to hand back over to you, Sandra.
Great, thank you, Lee. Yeah, lots to take in there, but yeah, really, really good summary. I think you're definitely all over it, and I often go onto your site just to see what is happening, because I think you're very good at communicating the latest situation. So thank you for that. I think a quick question, just what you said there about the 15th of October and how it now has to be compliant to EU standards, not equivalence, and then you mentioned the UK is starting to sort of drift a little bit. Are we okay for October the way it stands at the moment, or is there a danger that we'll have to change?
As imperfect as it is, and as many problems as it's created for us, having a trade and cooperation agreement means that the EU are not in a position to refuse our goods on the basis that we're not doing the same. Okay. So the risk is that we become a sort of a backdoor route into the Europe, which is, you know, on the negative side, some may say, well, that means that we are able to allow weaker goods that don't meet the same level of stringency into the EU, but that could potentially be an advantage for UK exporters. So as far as, you know, and the trade cooperation agreement is not something that has a sell-by date that suddenly ends. There are a whole sequence of kind of escalating committee meetings and discussions that need to happen for any changes to that to be made, or for any change in acceptance of goods to happen. And we know from the experience that these processes don't happen very quickly at all. So we would be looking at, even if the EU started to become concerned about the fact that we were not enforcing organic rules to the same degree they were internationally, or requiring the same things, it's going to take some time for anything to change around goods acceptance into the EU.
Yeah, got it. Okay. And then I think that the other point you made very clearly, I think, is anyone that's currently importing a non-processed product via the EU from a third country needs to start thinking about what impact that might have on their supply chain if border controls start getting a bit tighter, because effectively, it's
been in place for a while, and I think again we're trying to sort of think beyond now the initial challenges, not least for people like UK processors who've been fairly, heavily reliant on EU trading houses to source some raw materials from, and if those raw materials, as they say, just pass through Europe, then that's created headaches. On the flip side, it's created an opportunity space for importers in the UK wanting to bring goods directly in from origin, be that sort of Near East or Global South. But and potentially some opportunities there for UK exporters by extension. So yeah, it is always very tricky to understand how this shifting regulatory landscape creates opportunities. It doesn't, but you know, we're taking that on as a key part of my role moving forward, to try and understand what these changes mean, what the threats and opportunities are.
Great, very good. Good. Any questions for Lee? I think you did share your contact at the end there, Lee. Might want to just pop it in the chat as well. I think just to clarify that the sort of the rest of the world markets that you talked about, your service is such that you can support people in getting the right paperwork for those countries. Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah, should be clear on that. When it comes to necessary certification documents, often it is the responsibility of the control body in the UK, your control body, to sign those off and approve them. So yeah, we can help with that, whether it's for the US, whether it's for the EU, or an emerging group of countries that are starting to require something similar. But as I say, other than those I've mentioned, there are a few countries that will require something quite simple for us to endorse for you. But many export nations are just requiring you to show them the certificate of registration to prove you're certified in the UK for the product, and they're fairly happy with that.
Great. Ian, your hand's up, please.
Yep, thank you. Thanks, Lee. Good to hear from you again. Question, I know there's no developments with equivalency with China. I'm assuming there's nothing recent, but I've heard from some sources that Hong Kong could potentially be a route in for organic into the Chinese market. Have you any insight on that at all?
We haven't got any recent insight, but I think historically there have been opportunities kind of periodically opening and closing with certain sort of tax exempt zones in China, and Hong Kong having been one of those, where the Chinese government wanted to consumer spending goods and taxation of some of the input rules. But fundamentally, there's no, we're not very up to speed on that. I'll be honest, I wouldn't want to say that we've got really up-to-date data. We've been quite reliant on the past on people like China Britain Business Council, who've been really helpful in terms of giving us some specifics. But fundamentally, the rules haven't changed in that Chinese national standards are quite unusual in as much as they're like the US used to be many years ago, that you have to have certification to their standards at every point in the supply chain. So there is no equivalency process as such, and we have had very few businesses in the UK who have been able to export to China through the traditional route. So because where there's been a single ingredient product and been a group of farms, for example, in dairy, and we've been able to get a Chinese inspector from a Chinese certification body over to UK to go around and do the checks. Then that's work. But frankly, the checks were so limited, it does really feel like a non-tariff trade barrier. It feels as if it's a box ticking exercise, but nevertheless, it is a requirement. And as you can imagine, for multi-ingredient products where there's long supply chains going off around the world in lots of different directions, then having every single farm at the beginning of those and every single process is certified by a Chinese certification body and inspected is really, burdensome. So unlike MOP in the US, the old US system where they actually gave certifiers around the world the power to do certification themselves to the US standards, the Chinese haven't moved that direction. So all we're really left with is kind of cross-border e-commerce, which seems to be exempt from that. So the British products that we tend to see, organic ones in China, do tend to be pushed either directly through to consumers through cross-border e-commerce, and are on kind of, we see them on platforms, the big typical grocery online platforms like Taobao and Tmall, etc., but not much evidence of much elsewhere.
Thank you. That's what I expected.
Yeah, obviously, if it's something that I'm quite keen to revisit and see if there's been any changes. But if there's been any updates, then yeah, we'll let you know.
Great, excellent, good question, and yeah, thank you, Lee. Very good. Great. Okay, well, conscious of time, we've sort of reached our hour. So thank you, Lee, very much for that. I think that's really helpful. And I think I'm right in saying that the full report that you have brought out is available to download for a small fee for non-members on your site, and your customers can have it for free. So yeah, if anyone needs the full data, that's probably worth a few pennies spent to get some good insight. So thank you for that. And yeah, we must invite you back more regularly to keep us posted on all these things. So thank you.
Pleasure.
Good. Okay. I've just been asked to flag up a few quick things just on events. You will recall that we have a member now for the Latin markets, and they're going to be starting the first of their series of market deep dives on the 11th of March. So we have an event on the portal now that you can sign up to that will focus on both Mexico and Colombia. So I think that should be very interesting. There's an Australia focus in terms of sustainability and trends in the market from Atradius and Attis, which is on the 12th of March. And you mentioned the China British Business Council. They have their own event, which is their UK-China Business Forum, which members can get a discounted rate to go to, which is on the 5th of March, and that's an in-person event in London. So a reminder that if you go to members.ukfda.com, they're all listed there for you. We will be at the IFE trade show, which is coming up fast. I think it starts on the 17th of March. So myself, John and Mel will be there and hopefully manage to meet with some of you. There will be a member social drink on the evening of Tuesday as the show finishes at 5 o'clock. So if you're around on Tuesday, do come along and say hi. And again, if you could just let us know you'll come in by putting your name into the portal to say yes, you'll be there. That'll just help us make sure we've got enough light refreshments to keep everybody covered. And we have got a few panels. We're running some exporter sessions for IFE in their exporter hub. So if you are there on Monday, Tuesday or Wednesday and would like a bit of moment of fame and to join the panel, do let us know, because we've got a couple of gaps for people that were in, have had to pull out through travels. So yeah, anyone that's around, do drop me a line if you think it's nothing too taxing. They're just like conversations with myself and visitors that are interested. So trade show wise, Karen mentioned we're off to FoodX. There's still lots of shows live. I know Rachel and Karen from the PS8 team are keeping you up to date with all of those, but do start thinking as far ahead as sort of spring of 2026, because all these shows are growing in size and putting a lot of pressure on us to get everything put together. We were going to touch on Gulf Food, but I think we have run out of time. But I think just for those of you that were there, you will know that they are launching a second venue for the show in 2026. So meat, dairy, drinks and what they call power brands are going to stay in the existing Dubai World Trade Center, and then World Food, which will be predominantly the group stands, will move down to what's called Expo City, which is where they held the World Expo in Dubai a couple of years ago. They are connected by a tram, but they are about an hour apart. So it'll be quite interesting how the visitors will, presumably spend a couple of days in one and a couple of days in the other. So yeah, if you do exhibit at that, it's not a show that PS8 are running. It is run by the Dubai World Trade Center themselves. Or if you're in touch with your national government body, Welsh Government, and InvestNI and Scotland are all there as well. So yeah, start planning for that if you haven't already. And yeah, I think that's probably it from us as we've run over. So thank you everyone for joining. I think that was very interesting. I think, Ian, I was just thinking that was probably the perfect hour for you, wasn't it, with both Japan and organic? So I hope you got some good value out of it. And for everybody else, I hope it was interesting. So see some of you at IFE, and remember, we'll be back with this in 3 weeks' time again. So any topics that you'd like to chat, or if you want to present, or if you just want to bring up an issue, please do. It's very much your forum, and want to make the most of the time of that collaboration. So yeah, thank you all, everyone. Enjoy the start of spring, and thank you particularly to Paul for staying with us so late on a Friday in Japan. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.